All right, guys. Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Results Loading Podcast hosted by Prosperous AI. I'm your host, Michael Atkin, and today I'm very thrilled to be joined by special guest, Harry Reynolds, Operations and Sales Improvement at Echo Engineered Services. Harry boasts more than 3 decades of experience in the industry, specializing in operations, project engineering, as well as project management. We're super excited to get Harry's insights and expertise on the direction of the market, as well as mentorship, innovation, and much more today during our conversation. So with that being said, Harry, welcome. Thanks so much for agreeing to be on the pod today.
Thank you, Michael. I'm equally as excited as you to be here, to spend some time with your audience, right? Sharing some of our experiences, and hopefully, we all can learn a little bit from it and benefit from it. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Excellent, absolutely. And as you know, that's the purpose of the podcast here, to gain some insights from experts such as yourself. I like to think I bring a little bit to the table here myself every once in a while too. So looking forward to this one for sure, Harry. And with that being said, I want to dive right into it here. What inspired you to pursue a career in engineering as well as project management? Can you share any early experiences that influenced your decision to enter these specific fields?
Yeah, definitely. As a matter of fact, when I was back in high school, I remember I had a lot of affinity towards like math, physics, engineering, right? So I knew I like kind of like problem solving, right? And I knew I would definitely like one of the engineering fields, but I wasn't sure exactly which one I would like, right? So I was trying to debate, right? But at the same time, I had a very different interest in topic, which was psychology. I remember when I took the psychology classes in high school, that always intrigued me a lot, like how the human brain evolves and how the human behavior evolves, right? So it was probably equally as strong, but not as strong as engineering. However, I always like, when I was younger, I always liked, driving around and things being built, whether it was a big building, whether it was a big structure, right? Bridges, everything that was like highly visual, right? And I'm a very highly visual person. So I always enjoy like building things, right? And then my big brother, my oldest brother, he owned at that time, a small construction company. And sometimes as a kid, I used to go with him to see the projects during the construction. So I kind of like enjoy the construction. So I said, yeah, I definitely want to go into civil engineering. So that's why I decided to venture into civil engineering, right? And started basically studying the civil engineering degree. Although while I was taking all the classes, I noticed that I like a lot the structural engineering aspect, which it was the design aspect of the civil engineering. And I thought that I was going to work in that field. When I graduated college, I worked for a couple of years in the design consulting field, but it wasn't as excited as I thought. And then when I moved into construction, things started to become really interesting. I was very active. I had the opportunity to have relationship with many different people on many different levels, and it was really excited. So that's why I decided to pursue basically and specialize in construction, right?
Fantastic. And at this point, almost 30 years in the industry. So congrats to you on that.
Thank you.
And Harry, with that being said, obviously you spent 2 decades plus at Kinetic Systems. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about your decision to pursue a new career path with Echo, especially after all that time with Kinetic? And what insights can you really provide into identifying when it's time to move on and pursue a new career path, especially given your expertise and your tenure in your specific career?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's important. I'm glad that you bring this point to everybody's attention. I think it's important for leaders within the organizations to try to understand what's important for their people, right? People have different levels of motivation, right? Some people get motivated for money, right? Some people get motivated because of freedom. Some people get motivated because they want to have the ability to be creative in their jobs, right? They all have different needs, right? So as a leader, I think it's very important to really understand what's important to them, so that you make sure that within their career path, they have the opportunity to develop all those strengths and put in practice whatever is it that they like doing, right? So during my 20, maybe 4 years with my former company, Kinetics, right? I had the opportunity to play many different roles and play many different hats. So whenever I felt that I was maybe getting to master something and I wanted to do something different, I was looking for a new challenge. I always had the opportunity to talk to my leaders at the time, and I always find something different, right? Whether it was work at a different country, right? Whether it was play a different role, right, within the company. So I always had a new challenge in front of me, right? However, there was a point of time, right, that I have gotten to a point that maybe the company had become a little bit stagnant and I didn't have that many new challenges in front of me. And I was really looking towards something new, something that could challenge me, right, to put in practice what I knew, but also to try to, develop new problems, right? And I also enjoy a lot working closely with people, right? So when I see younger people eager to improve themselves, right? They want to find ways to do things better, right? That really is a big motivator for me, right? So I think that's one of the things that made me make the decision of changing the company, right? Having a new challenge, basically, in my professional life.
And did you have conversations with mentors at Kinetic before ultimately making the decision to go out and explore new opportunities? Or was it something that you took upon yourself? Because I know you, and we're going to get into this eventually, I know you are a mentor to many, and you take that role very seriously in terms of your professional career and mentoring others beneath you, of course, which we discussed. Did you have mentors at Kinetic that you kind of had a conversation with beforehand and said, hey, I think I've kind of hit a wall here. We're seeming a little bit stagnant. I may think about moving on. What did that look like internally, if you are able to share that with us?
Yeah, definitely. I had that opportunity to do that, like since the beginning of my career. I remember, right, just to give an example, back in the early 2000s, I was working in Shanghai, China. We were doing some large projects for a large semiconductor company over there. And when I got to work in the international environment, I noticed how competitive everything was, right? I wanted really to grow up within the organization, and I really wanted to move up in the corporate ladder, right? But I knew how competitive it was, right? So that's when I realized, definitely, I think I really need to invest in myself. And I decided to pursue a master's degree at that time, right? So what I did is during maybe the 3 years that I was in China, I started basically looking at opportunities for scholarships. I applied to a couple of universities, and I got accepted on 2 of those universities, right? And at that stage, I felt that it was going to be required for me to basically leave the company and just maybe spend a couple of years investing in myself, getting to know more, right? And when I presented the resignation letter at that time, the COO of the company, his name is Bob Pragara. He's now the CEO for Jacobs Engineering, which is one of the largest engineering consulting firms in the world. I remember he flew to China. He sat down with me, said, "Hey, I'm really interested in you staying within the company, right? You've done a great job, and we really want you to stay here, right? So, what can we do about it?" So I told him, "Hey, I'm trying to pursue a master's degree because I want to improve my professional skills, right?" And what he decided to do, he says, "Hey, let's do this. Let's make sure that maybe if you stay with us for another year or so here, helping us in this Chinese market, right? What we can do is we could relocate you to one of the offices that we have in the US, where maybe there are some good universities nearby, and then you can continue working for us and maybe still pursue your master's degree maybe in the afternoons, evenings, right?" And that's what we did, right? Basically, I started finding out where I could find a good university where Kinetics had operations, right? And I found Arizona State University had a very good construction management master's program. I applied to them, I got accepted, right? And then I got relocated, and that's why basically I moved to Arizona back then, right? So I had multiple opportunities to talk with the leaders of the company like this, right? And that kept me basically engaged constantly, right? Because, they care about what I wanted or what was important to me. Like in this case, this is what Bob did for me, right? And I appreciate that very much, right? And that's why I continue getting engaged. And through other years, I continue doing that, right? However, during the probably the last few years, I think Kinetics was going through a transformation period. and they had some changes in leadership, right? So a lot of the people that I knew, they left, right? And some new people came in, and while they were still doing a very good job, right? I still they were really busy trying to make that transition, right? And at that time, I felt that even though I was trying to express what I wanted to do, right? Maybe I wasn't getting enough attention, or maybe not attention, because they were so busy with the transition, they just didn't have time to put attention to everybody, right? Because they were busy with that transitional period, and that's when I felt it was the time to move, right? Mm-hmm.
Totally. And I want to expand a little bit on you working in Shanghai as well as other countries. I know you've worked in Singapore, Malaysia, China,
Mm-hmm.
the United States.
Mm-hmm.
How did working in such diverse regions impact your approach to managing projects and operations on a kind of a global level? Obviously regulations change once you cross international lines, of course. You know that better than me, of course. But can you speak a little bit to that and how it had that impact in terms of your approach to managing projects and operations?
Definitely. I think that's a very good question and a very good point. I'm glad you bring that up, because honestly, I would say for me, working internationally, especially in China, it was probably the biggest driver in me changing how I approach project management and operations, and how I approach leadership, right? And the reason being is because when you work with a new culture, right, the way they do things and the way they think about things, right, is very different to what we're used to, right? And I remember at the beginning, what I was trying to do is I was trying to make all my project team members, all my project engineers, my project managers, I was trying to make them do things my way, right? And we were not getting basically enough traction, right? Luckily enough, I started basically learning Mandarin. So I started taking some Mandarin lessons in the evening, right? And the good thing about this course is that not only they were teaching us about the language, but they were also teaching us a little bit about the Chinese culture, right? So they were telling us basically how people operate in certain environments, right? And that really opened my mind when I realized how culturally they operate and they have relationships with their peers and with their bosses. That really opened my mind and allowed me to, instead of trying to change them to do things my way, I started to understand how they do things, and I started to change my processes so they would adapt to them, right? And then I started having amazing results. So that's when I realized that as a leader, it doesn't matter whether you work in a different country or whether you work on a different institution or a different organization. You really need to try to understand the culture of that organization, that institution, try to understand their people, right? And once you do that, then you can try to implement the processes that you want to implement to try to improve that organization. But according to how these people view these processes, right? Just to give you a very quick example, right? I remember sometimes I used to assign to my engineers certain tasks and say, hey, can you do this I want you to do X, Y, and Z for this day, right? And this is the tool that you're gonna use, and they would say yes, they would do it, and then a week went by, right? And I sat down with them, and nothing was done, right? And then that would cause me frustration, right? But what I learned in this when I was taking these Mandarin lessons is that for the Asian culture, it is, I guess, very bad to say to a superior the word no, right? So if your boss tells you, hey, you have to do this, it doesn't matter whether you know how to do it or not. You have to say yes. You never say no to a superior, right? So the way I was asking them to do something, I never allowed them to say no. So I changed the approach. So whenever I had a new assignment to someone, I would ask them, hey, look at this process that I have set up. Have you ever used something similar? And they would say, oh, no, I have not used that. Oh, this is how you do it. And then I would sit down and explain to them how the process would go. And after I knew that they knew how to operate that or how to apply it, then I would assign the task, and the task would get done, right? So that's a very quick example of how it changed my mentality, right? So when I came after China, I came back to I went back to Arizona, right? And it really changed my mind of how I was approaching teamwork, basically.
Absolutely. And so it seems like China, and we know, China really does have that specific culture that has given them so much success, especially in the business industry for centuries, of course. They have their very unique way of doing things. Do you say China specifically had the greatest influence on how you're managing operations and projects? So I know you did Malaysia, Singapore as well. China is really where it seems like you got that full immersion, which helps kind of impact your tendencies in terms of managing once you return back to the United States, it sounds like.
Definitely. I think that was the biggest driver of how I changed the approach of dealing with basically large teams, right?
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense because with that full immersion, it widens your scope in a way, because Americans do business very specific way.
Exactly.
The Chinese do business very specific way. As you mentioned earlier, you never say no to your superiors. You have to just go and figure it out. Something that they do very well, obviously. So taking those ideals and those tendencies and bringing them back to the US and applying those here, I can imagine has been extremely beneficial for you. So
definitely,
thanks for sharing that.
No, definitely. And probably the time that I spent a few years later, maybe about 10 years later, I spent some time in Singapore, and I have the opportunity to work there with teams from many different cultures, right? So we had, just within Singapore, we had basically three very rich cultures that are very different. We have the Malay people, which are basically the natives of Malaysia and Singapore. Then we have the Chinese people, and then we have the Indian people, right? Those are the three cultures that are really compose the major of the population in that country. But at the same time, I had people from Germany, because we used to have operations in Germany, and so we have some Germans coming in and helping us out, right? So I learned to deal with the different cultures and learn to understand from a culturally speaking, what are they good at better than others, right? So I was able to basically change the assignments in a way that would maximize their strengths, right?
Absolutely. And I want to shift gears a little bit to leadership and development and mentorship. I know that's something that you take really seriously as a director level and a professional in yourself. And as a director of operations back at Kinetic Systems, and I know you're doing something similar but different now at ACO, you're still focusing on developing new leaders. That's regardless of the title. That's something that you take very seriously and you've been very clear about. How are you identifying and cultivating leadership potential within your team? And what strategies do you use to ensure their growth align with the company goals, for example?
Yes, definitely. So part of my journey into the leadership development started when I was doing my thesis for my master's programs. I wanted to pick a topic that was not necessarily very technical and engineering oriented. And I was lucky enough to have as my thesis advisor, Dr. Dean Kashiwagi, who is also a dear friend of mine. And he allowed me to really experiment, right? And the thesis that I did was basically a research about trying to identify a process for establishing the most successful business and leadership practices in the industry in general, right? Not only in the engineering and construction industry, but in general, right? So it was a very extensive research that I was able to do under his direction, and I started studying basically. The first part of the research was basically studying authors in the area of business and leadership, and see what practices they would promote. But sometimes I would find conflicting information in between the different authors, right? So what I did was, second stage was basically trying to prove these practices and try to see or disprove these practices, right? So I did a lot of research within by looking at case studies to see what the practice would do, right? And I was able to basically validate certain of these practices. And the last thing was try to put it in application into a company to see if people in real life applying these situations would have basically better results by having these better and different leadership practices, right? And during that period, I studied in depth Dr. Edward Deming, which is considered basically the father of a lot of people consider the father of just quality management, quality control, but in reality, he was the founder of what we consider right now lean processes, right? What we call Six Sigma or a lean manufacturing, lean construction, right? He's really the father, and he was really the father of the Japanese industry. He helped basically rebuild Japan after World War II, right, by implementing these practices, and that's why companies like Toyota, for example, famous for their Toyota production system, came out, right? And one of the things that Deming predicated in his teachings was that it is the responsibility of the management and leadership of the company to help their people do their job, and making sure that the outcome of the production system improves, right? A lot of cases when whether you're looking at manufacturing a production line or any business that is maybe selling products or services, whatever it is, right? People tend to find someone that made a mistake and blame them for the error that happened, right? However, if you start studying statistically those errors, you start identifying that a lot of the reasons where the system goes out of deviation is not necessarily because someone made a mistake, or if someone made a mistake, it could be improved by fixing the system, right? So you have to focus on the system to prevent basically mistakes from this like happening, right? So in doing so, I started to really focusing a lot on improving the system, right? So that we could allow people to do their job within those boundaries, right? And therefore they can have a better outcome, right? In doing so, it's important to get to know the people, right? So the first thing I like to do when I go to a new organization is get to know their people, get to know what's important to them, what's not important to them, right? And really, my personal definition of leadership is a leader is someone that cares to basically to make someone that makes sure that everybody around them thrive, right? In other words, right? So I could be a leader without a title, right? If I'm just starting at an organization, I will always have someone on my right, someone on my left, and as long as I have the true intention of making sure that the people around me thrive, that is what leadership is about, right? Leadership is about the responsibility one takes to make sure that people around you thrive, right? So you can do it on multiple levels, right? So what I try to do is when I go to a new organization, identify people that care about others, right? And try to promote that those intentions from them, and I try to facilitate everything that is in the way from them achieving that goal, right? So it's trying to remove constraints that would allow them to basically try to do a better job and try to help others within the team, basically.
Yeah, no, without question. And yeah, no, it's kind of a tale as old as time, if you will. Leaders lead by example, not necessarily demanding, pointing fingers and having some sort of condescending tone. Obviously there's a hierarchy in every company, but the best leaders, the best managers are the ones who lead by example and give those around them the opportunity to succeed, and those who are obviously trying their best to do their job, obviously, end up getting the best results. I remember one of my favorite examples is one of my first managers. He told me when he hired me, he's like, "I'll never micromanage you. I'll never bother you. The only time I'm going to bother you is if I hear about you in a negative way. I'm going to just trust that you'll do your job." And that was his management style. And we had literally one of the best teams in the country in terms of our performance, just because everyone just took care of business. He stayed out of everyone's way. He was there if we needed anything, similar to what you were just mentioning. And the results come naturally. It's psychological almost, in terms of almost encouraging people to be their best without having to force them to do so. And it seems like that is pretty in line with what you're describing in terms of your leadership style and mentorship style as well.
Correct. Exactly.
Yeah, Harry, exactly. So switching gears again here a little bit, want to get into the semiconductor and biopharma, data centers and solar energy that you've done. What are the unique challenges of managing projects in those specific industries, and how do you address them? Did you have a favorite? And can you just speak a little bit more to, your diverse array of background and experience in those specific sectors?
Yeah, definitely. I would say the advanced technology market, like biopharmaceutical companies, semiconductor companies, and to some extent, maybe some of the data centers. The most different aspect is that the processes for whatever is that they manufacture, whether it's a new drug or medication, or whether it's a new computer chip or whatever, right? Is the processes that they apply, technically speaking, are very different and very unique. And therefore, the engineering and also the construction process tend to be very unique in a way to them, right? Which is different, like if you're working in the commercial side or business in the commercial market or the industrial market, they tend processes to be more repetitive, right? And therefore easier to replicate, right? So I would say two things are the ones that strike me the most are different. One is that because of the technical complexity, you gotta have as a company that is providing services to them, and also even them within the processes, you gotta have a lot of processes that would allow you to manage different aspects of the business, right? So for example, just to give an example from an engineering perspective, it's very important to identify once the client defines the manufacturing processes that they need, right? And then the engineer firms comes in and start identifying, okay, in order to serve this piece of equipment and this piece of equipment, I need to have X, Y, and Z systems that are going to serve this, right? It's very important to start tracking basically, I would say for the quick development of the project, try to start tracking properly the long lead items that are going to be part of this project, because a lot of these items have maybe 1 year lead time. It could be 18 months, right? And they could basically jeopardize them starting the facility. So you have to identify those long lead items early enough on the project, and therefore you got to have a process to identify and to manage that very well, right? While if you're building a project that is a commercial project, right, you don't have that many long lead items, therefore you don't have to have a very sophisticated process to manage, right? Second is because nowadays, because of the market is so competitive, these companies need to get their product out the door very quickly. And therefore what happens is they start basically the construction of a project without the design being complete. And what that happens is it could create chaos in a way, because you have contractors starting to build something and they don't know what they're building, right? And therefore, at that stage, it becomes very important to have people with expertise that have done maybe similar work to this, right? Experts that are able to basically materialize a conceptual idea and are able to deploy resources that will help basically the client get this project going faster, right? And in order to do that, you got to have also very good and sound processes that allow you to manage basically the resources that are going to be required, whether it's people, whether it's machinery, right? So you got to have processes that allow to get certain key information from the client. It's going to help you prioritize the schedule of what parts of the project have to be built first, what part of the projects have to be built second, right? So that the factory will start operation quickly, right? So understanding the process of the client becomes very important so that you can prioritize the work the right way, right?
So yeah, a ton of moving parts, a ton going on, unique scenarios in each. What technologies are we using to optimize efficiency and organizational productivity within these situations? I mean, how does technology go hand in hand with how you're going and executing all the partners, the vendors, the data, the expenses, the plan? How are you leveraging technology in that sense to maintain that organizational efficiency, if you will?
Oh yeah, that's definitely that's what becomes very important. I think having the technology to be able to manage those processes, right? So there's a few software companies that create products that allow basically engineering and construction firms to manage these processes, right? So there's a few out there that have the ability to manage different aspects of this, and therefore it's just going to help the people be more efficient, right? But even if you do not have that technology, and maybe you're trying to use it just maybe with systems like basic systems like Excel or whatever, as long as you know the process and the workflow, you could develop a process that will allow basically the people within the company to try to organize themselves in a good way, right? One of the limitations probably that we face is the quantity of experts that are out there that could implement these strategies, right? And I think that's where, in my opinion, AI, artificial intelligence, is going to play a very important role in the near future, right? Because it is difficult to duplicate the expertise from an expert. However, if you are able to build a process, right, and you're able to program within that process certain level of intelligence that will aid basically the engineering and construction teams in the decision making and in the identification of risk, things will start go smoother, right? So in my opinion, I think technology currently plays an important role, but it will play even a larger and more important role once we start incorporating AI within these processes, which currently is not being done over there. But I have an initiative with some friends that we're trying to explore if in the near future we might be able to develop something that we could maybe get some AI incorporated into some of these processes, right? So just an idea that we have out there.
Got it. So you're not currently leveraging AI yet at ACO, but there are plans to implement, just given that's the direction of the market, right? I mean, AI has really moved into the mainstream and is really becoming, it is the new cloud, if you will. I mean, if you're not using AI, you will fall behind, because those who are utilizing AI, as everyone says, are going to end up coming out on top. So I'm glad that there is at least a plan, even if you're going to end up being the reason or the catalyst as to what starts to catapult ACO into utilizing and leveraging these tools. At least you're on the right track, right?
Definitely. That's the goal.
Absolutely. So Harry, what has been one of the most challenging moments in your career ever? If you're able to share with us a story like that, and how did you overcome it? On the Results Loading podcast, and you and I spoke about this the other week, I really like getting those grounded and more realistic stories, overcoming adversity, overcoming challenges, and how it made us better. What key lesson did you take away from an experience like that, if you're able to share one with us?
Yeah, I would say probably one of the most challenging experiences that I had, it was when I was managing one project in China some years ago. It was basically a new manufacturing plant for a semiconductor company in Dalian, China. The project basically was extremely aggressive from a schedule perspective, right? And I remember I was doing my productivity analysis, right? And basically I came to realize that basically the schedule that was being requested, it wasn't feasible to be done based on the production rates that we could achieve, right? So I started basically, I remember trying to explain that to our client, right? However, the client was really focusing, no, I want you to go ahead and do it, right? They didn't want to listen to, I guess, the technical reasons behind, right? They just wanted us to try, right? And try to figure it out, right? And I remember, I've always been a very data-driven person. And I would say probably the mistake that I had in this approach was that I was trying to have my client listen to me, but I wasn't listening to our client, right? Even though they were asking for something that maybe it wasn't feasible, that's what they wanted, right? And that's what they have hired me, right? And I remember there was a period of time during that project that there was maybe some heated discussions with some of our basically senior management, because we couldn't agree on something, and maybe the relation became a little bit tense during a period of time. At the end, well, we figured it out. We had to bring resources from many different countries, from Malaysia and from Ireland, in order to get this project done on time, right? And while it was not necessarily on the time that the client wanted it, it was not as pessimist as what I was explaining to them, right? So what I learned by doing this is when someone hires you to do a service, right, is because they trust you that you could do it, right? The important thing is try to become creative, try to figure out a way to do things, right? And don't try not to get very confrontational, right? Even though that you might be right, right? So
Right.
This is probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned, me personally, that I changed the approach after that on how I deal with clients, even though that I may have difficult clients, right? Is figure out a way what they really want, right? And figure out a way that we could go about it, right? You just try to be creative, right? So that's something that I learned, my approach. Instead of trying to be right, I'm just trying to say, oh, hey, how can I get my client what they need, right?
Yeah, which ultimately is the end goal, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you can sit around and point fingers all you want, but I think a lot of times people, especially in the United States, have a problem or have issues kind of swallowing their ego and
Mm-hmm.
unwilling to
Mm-hmm.
see the other side. You guys are both working together, striving towards a common goal. And I think it sounds really simple and it does sound a little cliche as well, but just hearing what the other person is
Mm-hmm.
saying
Mm-hmm.
and understanding where they're coming from in terms of, like you said, striving towards a similar goal is ultimately a huge tool and something that you uh, maybe don't even know you're doing, but can have some resistance towards sometimes. I mean, for me and my business partner have disagreements often, but we're still striving to the same goal. It means a few things. Number one is that you care. Number two, at least we have, you know, we're not limited in our opinions, but we're striving towards a similar goal and a similar outcome. And sometimes it requires deeper discussion and disagreement in order to get to that, you know, mutual goal, if you will.
Yeah, definitely. You know, at the end, you could make an analogy, right? Because you know everything is we're humans dealing with humans, or it's almost like when you're in a romantic relationship with your partner, right? And then maybe you may have a disagreement, and then you start putting, hey, this is why I think we should be do this because I'm right, and the other person, no, this is what I think we should do, and at that moment you stop listening to them, and you just start basically saying, no, I'm right. This is the reasons why, right? So it's something similar, right?
Yeah, no, it's applicable. It's definitely applicable to with your romantic partner for sure.
Uh-huh,
You
uh-huh.
know, and a lot of times at home for me, it's better if I just agree with her and keep the peace. You know, it ends up when at the end of the day.
And yeah, at the end of the day, it's listening, right? So if we're able to
Yes.
sit down with our partner and listen to them, there's a reason behind, right, that maybe we're not seeing. So just listening, it's just going to open our mind, basically. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And Harry, last question here before I let you go. You've spent a lot of time, as we've discussed, in the industry, 30 years almost.
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give to somebody starting their career in engineering or project management now versus when you start with everything that all the knowledge you've attained, the 30 years you've been in the industry? What advice would you give them now for someone who's stepping into the role maybe today?
Yeah, I would say I would encourage everybody that is starting to take leadership seriously and personally, right? Leadership, of course, is not for everybody, right? Because leadership comes with a lot of responsibility. However, I think if you start applying some leadership principles, like I said, if you have a starting job, right, you always have someone on your left, someone on your right that are trying to do a good job, and you start just going above and beyond what you're doing and try to understand the people on your right, the people on your left, and see if you can do that little extra effort to make sure that they can also thrive within the work environment. That's just gonna go a long way. Even if you are working on a very large organization that basically the corporate ladder may be very high, or maybe if you're working in an organization that maybe the leadership culture is not very well developed, at the moment you start making those changes and caring about others and making sure that they thrive, that's gonna start getting noticed by someone, right? And it's just gonna create almost like an effect, a contagious effect that people will start seeing, and hopefully will start replicating, or someone above it will see it and say, "Hey, I like what this team is doing," right? And suddenly, you could change the culture.
Yeah, no, great stuff. And I know we touch on mentorship a lot and the importance the important role it's played in your career. But you hit it right on the head. I mean, you start to feel the residuals and see the dividends, and your skill set just organically develops once you get involved in helping other people succeed as well, as opposed to just focusing on yourself at the task of hand. Helping other people better themselves, helping them with their projects, and everything in between organically develops you and increases your skill set and your level as a professional and as a human being as well. So I couldn't have said it better myself.
Excellent.
Yeah, Harry, so thank you so much for being on today. I think this was an absolutely fantastic and really insightful conversation. Do you have anything else you wanted to mention before we hop off here?
Well, no, I just want to thank you for reaching out to me and having this discussion. Right, I think it's been very beneficial also to me to hear your side of the story as well. I always learn new things when I basically have a new conversation with someone. So I appreciate the effort that you're doing of sharing this message and your message with others, because I know it's going to reach some people and it's going to make a difference, right? So to make a better world. So I appreciate the effort that you're doing with your program to try to basically, make us better humans, right?
Absolutely. No, if we can help anybody out through the Results Loading podcast, it's definitely a win for us. And that's why we have guests such as yourself to kind of trigger these conversations, gain these insights, and share them with the rest of the network. So great episode here, Harry. I really appreciate you being on, and take care, and good luck to you in your new role at ACO.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.